Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Today we have Travis Snyder in the house. Cory, tell us a little bit about Travis before we start.
So Travis is the founder of the Color Run, the largest running series in the world. He's also Ironman triathlon, and reading through the rest of the bio, which I won't go into because he's going to tell us about it. I'm thinking that I'm going to have to step it up in life, basically. So Travis, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Travis, tell us a little bit about you, your family makeup, and where the Color Run came from.
I grew up in North Carolina. I was a Tar Heel, still am. I've got my Carolina blue on now, even. It was a great place to grow up. Formed a lot of really good friendships and met a lot of wonderful people there. I played baseball for a while, and then I got into rock climbing pretty heavily. And the first event I ever produced was a rock climbing competition at a rock climbing gym called the Rock Garden. And that was my first taste of, I would say, the exhilaration that comes from an event. The planning of the sponsors, marketing the event, designing a t-shirt, all of those things. That was the first time I did those things. And we had a successful competition, and I think I got a little bit of a bug at that point. I was 17, and I enjoyed the process. So from there, my athletic, I was more of a participant. I got into triathlon in the mid-90s. I'd seen an episode of Magnum PI when I was younger. My mom and I used to watch it, where he did the Ironman while trying to solve a case. And it stuck in my brain for some reason. And instead of doing all the serious things after high school that all my friends were doing, I bought a road bike, learned how to swim, and just spent a year kind of figuring that out. So I think during that time frame, I spent a lot of time doing events, participating in triathlons, and some I thought were well done. Some were not as well done. And I think I started to formulate some ambition to produce events myself. So later on in life, I was a newlywed, and my wife, Heidi, wanted to do a triathlon, but was too intimidated to enter an official local one. So I found a location and made an event just for her, and she had a great time. And afterward was like, you should do this. You should do this for other people. You should do a real event. And from there, it turned into a series of triathlons in the west of the United States. And I did that for about 7 years. And it was fun, but it was challenging. Concern over participant safety, overall satisfaction. And so I ended up selling that business in 2010. And took a break from events at that point, kind of hoping to never do them again, because their events are pretty extreme. So like if you Google search most stressful jobs, in the top 5, you have like active duty military, policeman, fireman, pilot, these life-threatening types of jobs, but always in there in the top 5 is event director. And I think it's just because it's a high stress where you have to get everything right. I took a year off, did some consulting, kind of took it easy. I could see that fun oriented events were starting to get some traction in the mud space, obstacle space. And I kind of just set my mind to what would be the best way to deliver a fun-based endurance event.
So Travis, before we get into more about your family, talk to us, give the listeners a little context about your professional life, about the Color Run and the success you had there.
It was quite a journey. As a business person, I never really aspired to big success. I kind of viewed it more like, to use a baseball analogy, I want to take as many trips to the plate as possible, and I'm going for contact. Hoping I can scramble a single or or get on base. I think you would call me a reluctant entrepreneur because it was scary to me. The risks, all those things. My father is the most risk averse person I've ever known. And so I have him, and then I have my mother's father, my grandpa, who is a serial entrepreneur. One minute they're living in a mansion, the next they're in a trailer. He's got a donut business. Now he's a carpet business. Now he's got a general contracting business. And I'm watching that from afar like, whoa, I honestly have tried to sort of land in between. But in school, I never really felt like I fit in either the boxes of the business school or these other things. It was a challenge for me. And so I thought, well, if I can just get some base hits, get a house paid off, the whole rich dad, poor dad, cash flow, stay out of debt concept was pretty strong for me. So that's what I was trying to do, is hit a lot of singles. When the color and concept took off, it was great timing because I'd reached what Malcolm Gladwell calls the 10,000 hours. And at times I kind of felt like Neo in the Matrix, looking at all the code of what needed to happen. And so it was an exciting year when it launched. 2 years in, a Silicon Valley firm invested with us, and we brought them in to go to the next level, and I've been able to work with amazing events people all over the world. So there's most I could ever aspire to in the event space, and really, really satisfying.
Now it got huge though, right? The color run got like big. Like, talk to us about how big this color run actually got, like how it was extremely popular.
I think the best story to describe this is I did a bunch of research when we were getting ready to launch on the largest event series launches. And the largest in a year one was 6 total events in 1 year. And so I wanted to push that. So I said, we're going to do 12. We're going to do one a month. And our goal is 1,000 people per event. So 12,000 in a year, one a month. That's manageable and still like a good business. We started going, we launched, and the demand was so strong that we were selling out 20,000 person events with no marketing in like 5 days. And, we have customer service teams apologizing for not being able to get in, Facebook posts back when you could actually reach your whole audience. We would do a post and it would have 20,000 comments in 10 minutes. And I was monitoring the Twitter handle from my bedroom one morning. I was working, 12, 15-hour days, and someone had tagged the color run, and it was this girl who says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe the color run's not coming here this year. I've been waiting for 5 years for them to come." And we'd only existed 6 months. But to this girl, in her mind, she's been waiting for 5 years. And so I clicked on her profile, and guess where she lived? Take a stab, guys.
Russia.
Singapore.
Wow.
So I'm just like, on the other side of the planet is a teenage girl who'd never done a single ounce of marketing over there. It was just so much of it. So we were just scrambling. And in year one, we ended up going to 60 total markets, 58 in the US, and then 1 in Rio de Janeiro and 1 in Melbourne, Australia. The origin of the event is we give them a white t-shirt with our branding on it. And the idea is that at each kilometer, they go through a color zone. And by the end of the event, they're kind of a masterpiece. It's a way to sort of paint yourself while running. And in that year with 2 million participants, we couldn't find any white shirts. So we were looking everywhere. China was sold out. The US was sold out. It's a lot of white t-shirts to deliver on. It was an exciting time, but our business was growing virally like an app. But instead of needing to just create more server space, we had a logistics nightmare on our hands, figuring out how to, deliver on these events all over the world.
Tell us a little bit about your family, Travis.
I've got a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old.
Tell us what you love to do with those boys and some of the things that you've done to connect with those kids.
Well, I spend a lot of time with them. Honestly, I think for me as a young man, I did not aspire to wealth or power. I was maybe a little bit hippie in my approach to things, of just being present, soaking in memories, soaking in moments. I think when my oldest son was born in late 2004, he was born right before the new year, that sort of mantle of father, it hit my shoulders. And I think that weight of providing and doing what I needed to for this vulnerable, child that's in your hands. It's hard for me. It's difficult for me to adequately to describe the change in me when I became a father, and just that instant feeling. So I think from there, I felt that weight. I looked for opportunities to create value myself, and then I could have more freedom to be with the boys. So Luke and I, he's my oldest, we spend a ton of time together. His younger brother Miles was born 4 years later, so we just spent a lot of time together. My wife has a master's degree, was valedictorian. When we got married, I kind of thought I was going to be home dad. I was okay with that. This talented woman can go out and spread her wings and fly, and she's had businesses as well over this time period. So it's kind of like take turns, and I was always happy to take a more dominant role in the house. But then when it was kind of my turn to step up to the plate with a business, and we would go for it. My sons have memories of setting up triathlons together and setting up swim courses and riding around in canoes and sleeping in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere, staying up late, setting courses up and doing all those things. We travel a lot. They've been many, many, many more places than I ever went at their ages. And the truth is, I genuinely love being with them. I enjoy the energy they create. And so it's quite an organic thing for me to want to spend a lot of time with them.
What are some things you want to teach them, or that you hope that they've been taught, as you've gone through growing up and doing the color run and all these things that you've learned in your life? Are there some things that you say, man, I just hope my boys internalize a few principles that mean the world to me? What kind of things do you want to make sure that they're taught and that they internalize?
That's a good question. It's hard to choose. I think why it's difficult is because on one level, you're preparing them for battle, so to speak, to go out into the world and to be strong and to be resilient and to forge a path. And so I think as a father, you feel, I've got to toughen you up. I've got to give you the tools and the skills to handle what's going to be coming your way. And then there's also probably the softer things, right? The love and the service, those things, which they both connect. So when I answer that question, I think on the tougher side, it would be the law of the harvest. You find it in the good book, and you find it in Rage Against the Machine lyrics. What you reap is what you reap is what you sow. It's the most basic principle. Nobody that you talk about that to doesn't understand it, but it's hard to apply every day in life. They know it. I try to look for opportunities to teach them about, if you work hard and you grind and you keep going, there will be positive outcomes. And conversely, if you don't, you have some challenges in your future, probably. So that one's important to me. I have a hard time with a victim mindset. I think at different times in our lives, all of us can be made a victim in the moment, but the perpetuation of that over time, I think, wreaks a lot of damage on us. And so I don't want them to feel like they're going out into the world and things are just going to happen to them, that they don't have the ability to adjust their mindset, to, feel whatever they're going through, but to continue on, to get back up off the mat and to keep going. So I think that's important. I think I've spent a lot of time with them on the importance of family and making sure that they're close, the three of them as brothers. I think one of the most common things we say internally is that we build each other up in our house, that when you're in the walls of this house, we build each other up. Outside of this house, people will try to tear you down, whether it's a kid in school or a kid on the team or whatever. But here we're going to build each other up. And my dream and hope for them is that they're going off on like vacations together in the future, when they're 35 and their wives are annoyed that they're going again. You just hung out with your brothers. Well, sorry, we got to go. I think that those relationships are important for them.
That's great. Travis, do you have any books that you've read recently or lessons that you've learned from books that you just find as like staples in your life, and some of the principles that you've gotten from those books that you share with your family and your kids?
Yes, I do. I was digging a trench yesterday out here in Kauai with my oldest son, listening to your podcast in preparation for this. So I found out all about the origins of the Gentleman Podcast and these different things. And a lot of the book recommendations out there I agree with. So I was trying to think of something more unique to my experience. And I think there's two books that are interesting. One is called The Power of Moments. And the book is an intersection between my business life and my home life. And it's a fascinating book about why we remember what we remember, what makes something stick out in our minds and last, and what makes us forget something. And it's written in a scholarly way with a lot of research, so it's not a lot of conjecture. It's a little more science based, and I find it really fascinating because in the event world, my whole job is to create a moment for people, whether that was a triathlon or the color run or another event that we do, where we want them to come and have a moment with their people that transcends their everyday life, that brings some hope and joy. And then in my home life, it's the same thing, right? Like digging a trench with my oldest son yesterday, listening to the podcast while we're digging. That's a moment, right? And what are things that I can do as a father to make it a sticky moment when it's important, right? Are there things that I can say? Are there details that I can do so that he has those? Because it's not valuable if it goes in one ear and out the other, right? We want it to stick. I'll tell you a fascinating story from The Power of Moments. There's this funny boutique hotel in LA. Picture your standard motel. It's nothing fancy, and they're innovative, they're disruptive. And so what they decided to do was they had a budget increase. They could have either like upgraded the linens in every room, right? Okay, we'll upgrade them $1,000 each room and upgrade the linen. Or we are going to hire, what they ended up doing is they hired a butler. So they took all the $1,000 a room and made a yearly budget to hire an employee dressed in a butler costume. They put a large bell out by the pool. And when the people were at the pool, they would ring the bell and the butler would hear it, walk out with a red popsicle and hand it to the person and then walk away. The place is booked out like all the time. And it's interesting, right? In terms of ROI, how many people would have noticed a slightly softer sheet or a slightly better pillowcase versus this like crazy moment? I can see, even on your faces that you're like, well, that's never happened to me before. I've never had a butler appear and hand me a popsicle. So it's sticky. And I think that's fascinating. And so that's something that's been a big part of my business life in terms of creating events, but also a lot my home life. I called one of my team members the other day in anticipation of our visit. And I said, what would you want to hear from me? And he mentioned that on an Instagram story I did last spring, because we were in pandemic lockdown. My boys and I normally like to go to Angel baseball games, and we couldn't obviously do that. And so on the first day of the season, I like handmade some tickets for them, bought like nacho cheese sauce and, the foods that they normally like at the ballpark, and kind of created like a scenario like we were going to the ball game and surprised them. And he's like, that stuck out to me, that was kind of a next level of creating an experience and a memory with your sons.
Those are killer. We've had people, this has become a bit of a theme and talked about in different ways. Some people talk about it as being spontaneous, which creates memories that you don't forget. We've had people talk about, my kids don't remember any of their Christmas gifts, but they remember these moments, right? They remember these things they did. And ultimately, I think, like you said, there's a science behind that. There's a science behind doing something out of the box. Doug Wren talked about moonlighting with Einstein and how you can grow the length of time you're alive by creating those moments. So I appreciate you sharing that. Ultimately, why do we create those moments? I think it just comes down to love, right? We want our kids to know we love them. And so we proactively make these moments so that they can remember the time we had together, and we have moments that we can teach them that they remember. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's very insightful.
Travis, you talked about The Power of Moments, the book. Are there any other books that you recommend to the audience?
Sure. A book called The Attention Merchants. Our attention, our eyeballs, where they're looking, where they're thinking, is now a new commodity. Once you realize that that's a commodity, it puts some pressure on return on investment, right? Where are your eyes going? Where are your kids' eyes going? Where do they see your eyes going? We're here on Kauai, and one of the most beautiful things I see, we have some native friends here, and when the natives come together, there's the handshake, like pull in, but then they'll put their foreheads together, right? Touching foreheads, two strong men, and they just look each other in the eye. And it's so beautiful. It's this connecting moment that is like, my attention is on you right now. It's nowhere else. I can't look to the side. I can't look to my phone. I'm looking you in the eye, and I'm here. Attention is love, right? I mean, where your eyes are, where your heart is, where your desires are, where your eyes are going. So looking your kids in the eye, in that way. I think I've heard you guys mention that dads are around there, have 7 minutes of connection with their kids on some podcast. But I just think boost it, man. Like, look them in the eye, touch them, hold them, make sure, do anything you can to help them know that your attention is 100% on them.
Yeah, that's incredible advice. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Travis. Would you tell us a little bit about what you guys have been dealing with as a family lately? I know you're involved with some charity causes. Would love to hear more about that and the reason that you're involved and some of the things that you and your family have gone through recently.
Well, so my last 10 years of life have been very dramatic, highs and lows. We went from, some smaller businesses to this global business, moving very quickly. I was on a stage in Paris next to the Eiffel Tower as 20,000 Parisians are throwing colored powder in the air, and a French MC and I are like up there getting everybody going. I mean, that was, for an event person, that was, the top of the mountain. And so that was definitely my high. And then in 2015, so about 4 or 5 years later, I was in London meeting with our British team. We had a lot of events over there, and we were at Wimbledon because they helped produce the Wimbledon event. And I was just feeling terrible. I was taking probably like 10 ibuprofen a day just to kind of get up and get moving. I think endurance athletes, my years doing Ironman and triathlon, you get good at suffering through pain. So I just was kind of like, tough it out. But it was getting bad enough that I called my wife and said, hey, when I get home, I gotta get into the doctor quickly. And so I did. Went in, they ran a blood test at my request. My mom died from cancer when I was 21. And I think anytime you're a parent, you're exposed to that, there's this little worry inside your head that you're gonna eventually experience the same type of challenge. And so he did a blood test, and my white count was like 130,000, and it's supposed to be like between 5,000 and 7,000. So from there, it was an instant something's going on, and I was diagnosed with leukemia, which is a blood cancer. Something happens in your bone marrow where that's where all your blood is created. And for whatever reason, the formula goes off. It would be like if you were a developer building a bunch of homes in a big community, like a 200 lot subdivision, and you have your formula for framing, 2x4s, foundation, all those things. And all of a sudden it's inside out, right? The foundations are going on top, everything just flips. And the only way they have to address it is to basically drop an atom bomb on the whole community. So that's what they do. They hit you with a ton of chemotherapy and just basically blast your bone marrow. The origins of the treatment that they put me on was actually from World War I. Chemical warfare they were using in World War I. A bunch of British soldiers were hit with it, and when they went to do the autopsies, realized there was no marrow inside any of their bones. So it's crazy to think that something as horrific as chemical warfare from World War I saved my life in 2015. And so they hit me with a bunch of chemotherapy. That year I was hospitalized for about 7 months total. So they hit you with a round, your blood levels drop, you're in isolation, and then they wait for your counts to come back up a little bit. So you have a little bit of an immune system, but you're extremely vulnerable. You just, any bug, any fungus, any cut, any infection, anything is just, it's right there for you. So we went through it, and at the time my youngest was 2, middle age was 6, and my oldest was 10. So very, very, very young. And it was moving so fast, but I was gripped with the fear that I would leave them, that they would lose their dad. That was for sure my biggest fear. So we ended up going through it. One of the main ways to cure leukemia is what's called a bone marrow transplant. That's where they harvest cells or stem cells or blood cells from another person, and they infuse it inside yours. But they're risky because of the new cells and the old cells fighting each other, which can create a bunch of new complications. So they went to the database for me in 2015 and then realized that I didn't have any matches, which is unlikely as a Caucasian male. It was like an 80% chance you'd find a match. And so I remember that was a really discouraging day, because you're already in the fight, hoping for any kind of good news. And that's kind of like another, I think a punch down for you. And that was a tough day. So what the doctors decided to do is to keep doing the chemotherapy regimen and then monitor me so that I was in remission. And they monitored me, and I stayed in remission for about 3 years. And after about 3 years, it came back. And at that point, they checked the database again, and I still didn't have a match. But at this point, my younger brother, they had tested him, and he was a half match. And back in 2015, UCLA, where I was being treated, they had never done any half match transplants. And when I looked at the research, it was pretty scary in terms of like side effects and what could happen. But in the 3 years that I was in remission, UCLA had since done a couple hundred and had a lot better data out there. And so that being my only option, went for the half match transplant. I went in, they nuked me good. The nurse comes in wearing a hazmat suit. And you're thinking, this is going through a PICC line in my arm straight to my heart. But you can't touch it unless you're wearing like an ET costume,
Wow.
That's crazy.
So that was just over 2 years ago, and I'm still here. So yeah, it's to say it's affected me and my family would be an understatement. So we've all been in it these last 6 years.
What a story. So Travis, how has that affected your family relationships, and what has it taught your family?
We've all handled it differently. I think it's affected them in that it's trauma. It's a trial. I think the initial diagnosis was in some ways easier because there was a naivety to what was happening, and it just was so new. You're kind of in shock, so it's hard to really feel all the things that you would feel. But it's coming out of round one, it implanted in me kind of a wild urgency to create moments with my kids. And in some ways in a healthy way, and in some ways in an unhealthy way. We often hear about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think trauma is anything that you experience that just really shakes you, right? Whether you're in war and you're seeing people die, or you're getting shell shocked, or you're on a cancer floor in isolation, watching yourself waste away and turn into a skeleton, not knowing if you'll ever leave it again. It does things to you, but there is such a thing as post-traumatic growth as well. And it's a pivot, I think, to where you not in a cliche way, but you try to take that trauma and metabolize it in a way that creates growth. It's not pain-free in any way, but it does allow you to adjust, I think, in certain ways. My dad growing up, he had two phrases he would say to me. He's an English professor, so he's very well read and has a lot of quotes at his fingertips. But the two he said to me the most was never lie, never quit. And, that which does not kill me makes me stronger type of sentiment. To be totally vulnerable and candid, I'm only now able really even to talk about it very much without being quite taken over by the experience. The relapse and the treatment and then COVID happening when I'm just sort of barely coming back to life was not a great time.
So what made you decide to get involved in the charity work that Sterling's talked to us about? Tell us a little bit about that.
The bone marrow registry has 2% of the global population, or the U.S. population, in it. As a comparison, the organ donation, which you answer on your driver's license, is over 50%. So it's capturing a large percentage of the population. And obviously, I didn't have a match. There were other patients on my floor who didn't have a match, particularly those with more diverse ethnic backgrounds. For some reason, there's a lot of donors out of Germany, which really beefs up the Caucasian, German heredity type of group. But if you're like Asian American, African, your percentage of finding a match drops dramatically. And in the business world, I was good at looking for opportunities and attacking them. The idea that there's only 2% in the database is insane to me. And really, you meet highly educated, like connected people, and none of them know about the bone marrow registry. The education around it is very poor. People think you're going to be like, Wolverine strapped to some metal table and have your marrow sucked out or something, or that if you give your bone marrow or your stem cells that you'll suffer adverse side effects. And so, we're starting the 2 to 10 campaign, which is our goal is to get the registry to 10%, which still seems small, but I'll take a 5X at this point. And so we're raising money and we're gonna build an awareness campaign, educating people about it and to the ultimate standpoint of saving people's lives. So
that's great.
That's a noble cause, Travis, and one that I know is near and dear to you. And we wish you the very, very best in your continued recovery and treatment. Ask all of our listeners to put some good vibes and prayers up for you and your family and your boys and your wife.
Yeah, we're good. We're in Kauai. I'm at 2 years now, and so there's more daylight ahead. So that's great. And if any listener wants to go to bethematch.com to get on the registry, they should.
Having you on and having your personal story tied to it, you actually can put a face and a voice to somebody who benefited from a bone marrow transplant.
It sounds like growing up, there were some things that you went through, and it sounds like your dad taught you some things. I'm sure your mom did too. That made you tough, that made you who you are today, that allowed you to get through some of the things that you've had to do. Talk to us about some of the things that mean a lot to you about that you learned growing up or that your parents taught you.
The most profound parental lesson that I learned was going back in my rock climbing days. I was wanting to adventure and do all that stuff as a 17-year-old. I think most teenagers, you kind of go temporarily insane for a couple of years. It's amazing how much you think you know at that age. And I wasn't a bad kid, but I was in a little bit of that space, and it was like a school night. And I ended up out until like 3 a.m. and I snuck over the fence and tried to get in my basement bedroom, through the window well or whatever. And I crawled through I came through the window and I could tell a lamp was on in our den outside my bedroom. And so I peeked out and my mom was sitting there, and I could tell she'd been crying. So she looked emotional, and she gave me this biggest, deepest hug and was like, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And then went up to bed. At that time, my dad was a little bit more of a disciplinarian, kind of, if you don't keep our rules, penalty type thing. And that one with my mom, it just it shook me to my core, to be honest. You talk about the power of moments, right? Here I am, I was 17, I'm 42 now. What is that, 25 years ago? It shook me in a way that with my own sons, I can teach them this principle, all day long and try. But if I can't build that upon this deep affection and love, then it's going to be tough. And so I've really tried to be that way for them. We'll see. I hope they feel that way. And I think also with my health battles, it's made me be very calculated about my interactions with them, because I've said goodbye to them to go in for treatment now 5 or 6 times. with pretty not great odds that I'd probably see them again. And so that does something to you, and it creates this, in an unhealthy way, there's this like urgency of just like, you just want to grab them, you know? Now it's just like, I'm breathing, and I'm not trying to force the moments, but whenever there's a chance for me to connect with them, right, and for them to firmly realize how much I care about them, how much I'm there for them, I do it.
Travis, you've kind of given a perspective though of somebody that we haven't had this discussion on the podcast yet, of somebody who's kind of stared death in the face and is here to talk to us about it and the way that it impacted him and the way that he interacts with his family. So, I mean, just for the authenticity and the vulnerability that you brought today, like it's not like a color run high, right? It's not like, but it's something that we all need to hear, and it's something that we all need to think about. Like, what if tomorrow was your last day? What would you want your family to know? What would you want your family to know that you thought about them? What are the things that you've left undone? Are there people that you haven't forgiven that you want to forgive? Are there people that you want to ask forgiveness from? There's a whole long list of things that conjures up in my mind. Props for the authenticity that you brought to the podcast today, because it's made me think about my own life, and hopefully the people that listen to the podcast kind of get the same thing. I love that, the power of moments, creating those bookmarks. Cory and I call them bookmarks sometimes on the podcast of, I remember this one time that my dad took me aside, and said this. Why do you remember that specifically? Awesome to have you on today and to talk about some of these things. At the end of each podcast, we ask our guest what they think it means to be a gentleman. And, this is the ideal, and hopefully what we can become ourselves, and something that we hope that our children become behind us. What do you think it means to be a gentleman, Travis?
First off, I love the word gentleman. I always have. For me, I probably break it down into the two words, gentle and man. I think our society, the brand of man and manhood tends to be aggressive and strong and powerful and all of those sort of masculine stereotypes. And so gentle combined with that is a neat sort of opposition. I like words that have both meanings within them. But I think, and the word gentle is obviously pretty self-explanatory. And I think in my life, there's been times where I've been on the top of the mountain, sort of, I am man, hear me roar, and had power or money or whatever and success in that way. And then there's been times when I've felt like a leaf on a tree, just fluttering down, so vulnerable, anything could take me out. And I think that's life. We're going to have both of those time periods. And so being a gentleman, I think, is possessing that masculine strength or that stereotype, but also having the gentleness, having the vulnerability, the love for your people. I'm a strong person. I'm a determined person. I know how to suffer, and I'm not going to give up. And that's been demonstrated in my business life, and also with this cancer battle. But I couldn't have done any of it without amazing people around me, mentors, team members, my family, my friends, those support people that you need in life to get you through those times when you need it.
It sounds like you have a pretty incredible wife, amazing boys. Is there anything you want to say to them before we end the podcast?
Ooh, that's a good question. Go be gentlemen, man. Be strong, be gentle, take care of the people around you, and I know you'll be successful in whatever you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Travis.
Yeah, guys.
If you want to be a part of the movement to increase the bone marrow registry from 2 to 10%, go to bethematch.org and get involved, get yourself on the registry, and bless the lives of people like Travis and his family. Thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
Join us next week. Thanks, guys.